boasts some 2,000 years of history as the capital of Korea, from the Baekje Kingdom to the present. All the royal palaces where the kings lived for over 600 years during the Joseon period were built in Seoul. And most of the people who worked in these royal palaces formed a community in Jongno-gu. Everything related to the royal court, from clothing to construction, was created by masters in their respective fields. The clothing worn at the royal court was simple yet highly luxurious. While common people wore cotton clothing, the royal family dressed in silk garments made at the Bureau of Royal Attire, 상의원. All the royal clothing was handmade by the nation's top tailors, who used only the finest fabrics and dyes. The king wore various attire depending on the occasion. For important events, such as coronation ceremonies, weddings, rituals at Jeongmyo and Sajik, and receptions with Chinese envoys, the king wore a coronet, myeonryugon, and the highest ritual vestment, gujangbok. When receiving envoys from Japan and the Joseon dynasty, or during morning meetings with government officials, the king wore a hat called wonyugwan and a robe called gangsapo. For executive duties or official meetings, the king donned a headgear called ikseongwan and a robe called goryongpo. The queen's attire was even more luxurious and beautiful than the king's. The most elaborate dress for the queen was the ceremonial robe called jeogui, embroidered with colorful pheasant patterns and adorned with gold piping. Jeogui was worn on important occasions such as national rituals and banquets. The queen's headgear included hairpins engraved with various patterns that perfectly matched her beautiful and luxurious dresses. In sum, the royal garments represented the pinnacle of Joseon clothing in terms of design, color, and quality. The foods of the royal palaces were prepared by Joseon's top chefs using the best ingredients sourced from all over the nation. The king's meal, called surasang, consisted of 12 side dishes, chop, in addition to bowls of rice, soups, and various pickled and preserved foods. Only the king and queen could have meals with 12 side dishes. All other government officials had meals with 9 chop or fewer. The meals for the king were prepared in the royal kitchens, including the saenggwabang for cold dishes and the sojubang for hot dishes. All meals were served with silverware. The king was attended by 2 court ladies, 상궁, a jimil 상궁, who tasted the food to ensure it was not poisoned, and a sura 상궁, who attended to the king's various needs until he finished his meal. The meals served at the royal court were prepared with the finest ingredients by the best chefs and served on the best tableware. This royal court cuisine is still popular among modern Koreans and can be enjoyed at traditional Korean restaurants in the Insadong area and other parts of Seoul. The palace was the king's residence, and all palaces had separate living quarters for the king and the queen. Gyeongbokgung consists of 5 buildings, including the king's executive office, Gangyeongjeon, and the king's sleeping quarters, Yeongsaengjeon, a name reflecting the hope for the king's health. On both sides of Gangyeongjeon were auxiliary buildings such as Yeonsaengjeon and Gyeongseongjeon to the left, and Eungjidang and Yeonggildang to the right. The living quarters behind Gangyeongjeon were reserved for the queen. The major building of the inner court was Gyotaejeon, with Injidang to the left and Hamwonjeong to the right. The living and sleeping quarters for the king and queen were also found in other palaces, such as Taejojeon in Changdeokgung, Hosangjeon in Gyeongigung, and Hamyeongjeon in Gyeongungung. The inner court was decorated with a small garden behind the buildings. The garden was primarily made as a resting place for the queen and court ladies, as women were not as free as men to venture outside the palace. Notable garden sites include Amisan behind Gyotaejeon and chimneys decorated with patterns of 10 animals and plants, symbolizing longevity, behind Jagyeongjeon. Everything related to the royal court, including clothing, housing, and food, was comparable to a great work of art.